Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Fellman, mom, homeschooler, educator. So, today I want to talk about this site I found. I actually found it the other day while doing some research, and I meant to make a video about it, but I put it off till today because I had some thinking to do about it. I want to be careful how I phrase things when I do this video because it would be really easy to come off dismissive or for people to misconstrue what I'm trying to say as ignoring that racism exists or acting like there's no difference at all between somebody who's white and somebody who's not white. That is not what I'm trying to say. When I tell you, as I'm about to do, that I don't believe in whiteness, I'm talking about as people like those who have produced this website I'm about to show you, or Robin DiAngelo refer to it as a culture, as a thing you can look at, quantify, be aware of, consider, etc., as if white people are, the Borg. I find they talk about people of color similarly, like we have the same thoughts, or we have the same ideas, or we have the same values, and in fact, people are actually rather diverse creatures. So we may share a level of melanin, and we may even share culture in the sense that there, Western elements or Western European elements to the culture of most white people. And I say most because not all. But and similarly, Black people or people of color may share some cultural things about their culture, music, food, etc. But even there's so much diversity. There's so many differences. You absolutely cannot tell by looking at a person of color what their background would be. What you certainly shouldn't try. You shouldn't try judging just by their skin tone, and you definitely shouldn't do it with people who are white either. So when I say I don't think there's whiteness and that we should be aware of our whiteness, that's what I'm talking about. I just don't look at people that way. I think in terms of individuals, I think in terms of being polite, I think in terms of being respectful. I'm more of a humanist. I think we're all human. And while we do have cultural differences and, ethnic differences and maybe religion and the way we, maybe even language differences that do inform our thinking and inform our choices and so forth, these are things we should try to get to know about each other when we get to know each other as individuals. So as a teacher, when I go into a classroom or if I'm tutoring somebody, I definitely want to learn as much as I can about that individual child or those individual children in my care. And that would include their family life, their background, their culture of origin, things like that. If it's relevant to them, I'm going to draw from them and not project onto them. So when I try to get to know a student, if they start offering up information to me that is clear, they're speaking about a culture of origin that is different from mine, okay? And they could be white and doing that. I'm going to try to draw more information out from them. So tell me about that. Tell me about yourself. What do you like about that? Because I want to know who they are. I want to know what they care about. And I want them to trust me and know that I care about what they care about. They are important to me. And I just see that as part of being a decent person, part of being, especially when you're a teacher, it's just part of being trustworthy. In order to be trustworthy to your students, you have to respect them. In order to respect them, you have to get to know them. And in order to get to know them, you have to ask questions. You have to approach with curiosity, and you have to be mindful of the fact that somebody new to you is somebody new to you. You don't know them. And the last thing you should do is try to make assumptions about them, least of all based on appearances. So I would hope people would do the same with me. I would hope people wouldn't look at me and judge me purely on the color of my skin. So therefore, I'm going to be equally mindful and respectful of other people when I approach them. That's how I operate. So again, I hate to be repetitive, but when I say I don't agree that whiteness is a thing, that's what I'm talking about. So I hope I'm clear on that. I definitely don't want to sound disrespectful or dismissive. I just have a difference of opinion. So with that said, I want to look at this website, Teaching While White. I found it and I tried to give it a chance. I tried to read it with an open mind and see, what are they trying to say? What are they trying to do? And I just found so many problems. So I want to go over some of those and explain them to you. First of all, let's go to the About section of this site. They do acknowledge more than 80% of teachers in the US are white. And it says, but most don't know that their whiteness matters. So again, when they say don't know their whiteness matters, I mean, I certainly don't walk into a classroom and think that who I am, how I look, etc., is irrelevant. I wouldn't do that. But again, I just explained to you how I approach people, so I don't see it this way. And this is talking about being intentionally, consciously anti-racist, anti-racism. I've talked about it on this channel before. This is something other than saying I'm not racist. In fact, anti-racist teachings tell you can't say I'm not racist because you are. If you're white, you're automatically racist. Well, I reject that out of hand. So already when I see this, I know that I'm of a different philosophy than the people who created this website. So already, this isn't really for me. And I disagree with it. So I wanted to go to what their working assumptions were. I wanted to see what are their working assumptions here. And this is where I found some big problems. Privilege and prejudice are two sides of the same coin. As I'm elevated, someone else is marginalized or oppressed. Elevated is a very passive word. It implies I rise up sort of magically, or as I'm lifted up by something or someone else, as opposed to my own effort, my own achievement. And this is someone else is marginalized or oppressed. That's simply not true. That is not true. Now, I assume they're implying that privilege and prejudice, that goes with whiteness, but I think I'm almost the poster child for how untrue this is. I grew up what most would call privileged. I didn't have to worry about, where my meals were coming from. I didn't have to worry about school. I didn't have to worry about so many things that many kids have to worry about. I mean, I did come from a divorced family and it was really messy and there were some problems at home, but that just explains why privilege isn't what you can see on the outside. It's not in the color of your skin and it's not even in how much money your family has, because every day I felt stressed and traumatized by what was going on at home that you couldn't really see from the outside. I believed the sales pitch, if I'd go to school and get good grades, that, the world would be my oyster. I could do what I wanted. It just didn't turn out to be true. I went to school. I dutifully got good grades. I went to college. I dutifully got good grades. And guess what? I didn't know what I wanted to do at first. I had no idea. I was aimless. I had all kinds of psychological things going on. And that came from my upbringing that I'm sure to the outside world looked so privileged. I saw people surpass me by leaps and bounds because they knew what they wanted and they went for it. They grew up with a lot less. In many cases, they would be what you'd call marginalized people, but they succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. So that came later in life. I guess what I'm trying to say is nothing's a guarantee. And the notion that you have privilege may tell something about where you're starting in terms of what opportunities are sort of laid out in front of you as a child, but it won't tell you anything about where you're going to end up. And this seems to imply that they are directly related, that it's, correlation is causation. And then it also says, as I'm elevated, someone else is marginalized or oppressed, that you cannot rise up, you cannot achieve, you cannot, succeed without someone else failing. And that's just factually inaccurate. It's a logical fallacy. Then let's see, I'm going to skip some stuff here. Oh, I will never see the world through the eyes of a woman of color. I will never see the world through the eyes of anyone of color, man, woman, child, anyone. I will not live life as a gay person or as a trans person. There are so many ways I'm not going to experience life. I don't know how worthwhile it is for me to spend too much time thinking about that other than to acknowledge it, which is one of those things that I like to believe people who are decent and polite and self-aware do sort of automatically. If you walk around the world thinking, I'm sure everyone thinks like I do or should think like I do, you've got a problem. And the irony of all of this is I see more of that kind of thinking in people who espouse some of these views. Anti-racist, the sort of woke ideology is extremely intolerant of other views. can't seem to wrap their minds around the fact that other people disagree in good faith. I mean, they have reasons for disagreeing that are not grounded in evil like racism. So I just found that kind of interesting. My white identity includes white privilege as an aspect of my whiteness. Again, I disagree with all of this. I don't have a white identity. I have the identity that is Deb, that includes all kinds of choices I've made and things that I've done to develop my personality and my interests and so forth. But the whiteness of me, or the whiteness of my skin, is the least interesting thing about me. And it's not something I think about. Some people might say, well, that's your privilege. You don't have to think about it. Okay, I guess when I'm here, but there are places I can go where one would argue I can think about it, should think about it, etc., and I still don't. Or at least I've trained myself not to, because I don't think that's a good way to interact with the world. I think you create barriers. It's something about me, but if I focus on the differences all the time and I focus on how I'm different from the people around me, that feels like it's putting up a wall. That doesn't make me open to the world. It doesn't make me receptive to different points of view and different people. That puts up a wall that blocks me away from them and creates a feeling of distrust. Like I'm going to be walking on eggshells. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? I mean, look, I started making this video a little bit inhibited. Like I'm about to tell people I don't think there's such a thing as whiteness, and I know I'm going to get pushback, and people go, how could you not say that? Look at your skin. Yes, I get it. That what I'm talking about is their concept of whiteness. Let's skip ahead. If I'm called a racist, it is not the end of the conversation, it is the beginning. Well, if you're talking to me, it's probably the end of the conversation, because I don't really have anywhere to go with a conversation with somebody who calls me a name that I think is evil. It's like one of the worst things you can call a person if you're racist. And if they're coming at me without any empirical evidence, they can't say, look, you intentionally chose this person over that because of their race, or you said something that, you called somebody a horrible name or whatever, and you meant it. If you don't have evidence like that, and you're just going to say, well, you're racist because you're white, like automatically, like Robin DiAngelo would say, that is the end of the conversation. You've rendered yourself irrelevant in my life. That is a Kafka trap. I know you're coming at me in bad faith because you don't know me. And if you're going to judge me purely on the basis of the color of my skin, we have nothing to discuss. I'm just going to move along. I don't want to waste my precious life energy talking to or arguing with people who walk around with preconceived ideas. I consider that racist. I consider that closed-minded. I consider that somebody I don't need to waste my time on. So wish you well, don't wish you harm, but I'm moving on. But now I want to go back to, so this is kind of their working assumptions are already things that put me off. And somebody might say, well, why are you shutting down? Why don't you be open to this? Because I think this is detrimental to human interaction. I certainly think it's detrimental to teaching. So, this says here, individual accountability is what changes cultures. The way I see myself is intimately connected to the way I see others. If I don't understand what it means to be white, I'll tell you what, this is where my disagreement really comes in. It says, if I don't understand what it means to be white or heterosexual or upper middle class, how can I ever hope to understand another colleague or student? Here's the thing. If I don't understand what it is to be me, now these might be all parts of what make me me, but how I feel about all that is more important than those facts. So if I feel guilty about those things, or if I feel inordinately proud of those things, unearned pride, if I feel resentful about it, if what I feel about who I am and what I feel about my identity is more important than what those little factoids are, because that's going to influence what I'm putting out into the world towards other people. So if I feel good and comfortable with myself, if I understand where sort of I leave off and other people begin as just a matter of my human, my humanity and my individuality, if I have solid boundaries for myself, if I'm self-aware enough to know that other people don't think like me and I shouldn't project onto them, then that's where accountability comes in. That's when culture changes. How you treat other people is your character. And if we all looked at it that way, I believe we would change the culture and it would become a more inclusive, accepting, tolerant culture. You wouldn't need to worry about diversity as a thing because we would just be functioning as people. We'd be functioning as individuals, voluntarily interacting with each other as it suit our needs and contributed to our happiness. That would improve the culture immeasurably. We'd be more civil to each other, more polite to each other, but happy people are civil to each other. People who are content within their own skin are civil to each other. That changes cultures. That makes you less racist or less judgmental, when you're not angry and resentful and bitter and blaming. But when you set things up as, white people are inherently racist and anything that is disparate in the Black community is the fault of racism, ergo the fault of white people, there's a wall there. We're now focusing on differences, not what makes us the same. And what makes us the same is we're all human beings. And we all want to be happy, and we all want to learn and grow and raise our children and be safe and these kinds of things. So I just don't agree with this way of thinking. Doesn't align with my worldview, and it makes me sad, to be honest. So I want to go back to the homepage briefly, because there was an article, recent one, October 28th, called Civics Education for Cultural Change. And some people have asked me, well, why don't we teach civics, or when are we going to teach civics? And at the same time, I made a video the other day about social justice in school and what is social justice and what are they trying to do. And this article that they wrote on this site kind of drives home the point that what the social justice folks today, the proponents of it, using critical race theory in particular, want to do is change the country. They want to change what civics even is. So I think of civics as learning how the government functions, learning about the Constitution, what your rights are and aren't, learning about the branches of government, how the justice system works, et cetera. And, at the federal level, local level, state level, learning about all those differences and separations of power and what it means to vote, the responsibility of voting, learning about the history of the country, how we got here, how our rights have been protected over the years, how they were violated over the years, all that kind of thing. That's part of civics, but always leading towards how are you going to vote responsibly, not which way you're going to vote or what specific programs or agendas you're going to vote for, but how are you going to take this all into account? Do you understand what your vote even means? Do you understand what it's going to do when you elect someone, what power you're giving them in your life? Do you understand that? That's what I think civics education is about. But here they right away with the title say Civics Education for Cultural Change. So they're telling you they want an agenda. They want to teach civics with an agenda. Now, understand that when you go into a school, especially a public school, with a political agenda, in my personal belief is that you are hurting this precious democracy that people keep talking about, because this is a public school. These are public schools. Public schools are publicly funded. And I don't think you should carry a political agenda, especially one that aligns pretty much exclusively with one political ideology, into that public space, because now you are using public funds to push a political agenda. And I've said this before. I said this to teachers at one of my daughter's former schools. I said, how would you feel if the shoe were on the other foot? How would you feel with what your beliefs are and your values are if the prevailing wisdom for the schools was, we need to use civics education to teach people that all of those ideas are bad, that homosexuality is bad, or that the country is so much more perfect than every other country, you should be terrified of foreigners, whatever. How would you feel if that's what they wanted to use civics education for? The illiberalism in the other direction. And I like to believe most people would be horrified, and they should be. They absolutely should be. I wouldn't even want a school teaching, the views that I have in the civics classroom. Just teach the civics, let the kids make up their own minds. You can expose them to different issues, different things, but I think you would then say, there are people who believe this and there are people who believe this, and maybe a third way or whatever. You could even invite guest speakers to come in and present different views. But I do not think you come at it from let's change the culture using civics education this way. And they speak about, racism. There's a reckoning that's long overdue, a lot of critical race theory inherent in this article. But I wanted to pull out, there was one thing that I wanted to pull out of here, and here it is. I understand that the focus of social studies and the teaching of civics in particular has long been debated, as it should be. But I hope it's abundantly clear that in order to teach about civic engagement today, about citizenship, we need to both make sure we include all students, why wouldn't we, in the conversation, and address key issues facing the nation. I also hope it's clear that for far too long, we've associated the teaching of civics with inculcating an acritical stance toward U.S. history. I don't know where this person went to school, but that is not consistent with my education at all. An acritical stance. In other words, civics classes can be, indeed should be, reimagined to focus on historical and contemporary issues related to racial justice and our efforts to improve our democracy. It is not just okay to focus class time on adversity and activism. It's essential to teaching about citizenship. So what's funny here is they're saying it's not just okay to focus class time on adversity and activism like in the other classes. Now we have to teach citizenship. When we teach civics, we have to teach about racial justice. So racial justice has to find its way into every single class. And that is the problem I have, because this presupposes that we have racial injustice, which means there is something wrong and unjust. The people are being singled out by race to be treated unjustly in an institutionalized way, in a systemic way. And the problem I have with this premise, and it's one you can see as the foundation of all critical race theory and all the social justice curriculum that's finding its way into our classrooms today, is it needs to be challenged. It needs to be challenged. Kids need to hear the challenges. You should not go into the classroom and treat this as a fact, because it isn't a fact. It's an opinion. Systemic racism is an opinion. Critical race theory is a theory. These are not facts. So to use the civics classroom to teach about racial justice is teaching the students something as fact that is an opinion, that the country is racially unjust, inherently racist, that white people are inherently racist, and that the country is white supremacist, etc. And that should not be the operating guiding principle, because it's not factual. It's just not. It's the opinion of a group of people, and the fact that so many of them are teachers is disturbing to me. Because how do we expect our students to come out and think critically, think scientifically, ask questions, be skeptical, look for evidence, and judge the world as it is, not just how it feels, if we won't do it ourselves as teachers? So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you enjoy this kind of content. If you do, I hope you consider subscribing to my channel, like this video, comment on this video, share this video. That's the video.